Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. So as a book person, I'm constantly being asked what my opinion is on books, especially the most popular books. And if you clicked on this video, chances are that you're on BookTok too. As a book girly myself, I know it can get a little overwhelming when a lot of people are talking about so many books and you don't know what to read and you don't know if they're overhyped or if they're actually worth your time. If you've been there, this is the video for you because I read them so you don't have to. And now I'm about to tell you which ones are actually worth your time and which ones you can avoid. I've done my research for this video. I read all of these so you can read the best. I feel like I have to start with this series because when I originally first got on BookTok, everyone was talking about this series and everyone is always screaming, crying, throwing up, going on and on about how much they love this series. And it's the ACOTAR series by Sarah J Maas. If series are a little daunting for you, especially fantasy series, you probably haven't given ACOTAR a chance, but you also probably feel a lot of FOMO because everyone is talking about this series all the time. So the ACOTAR series, in case you don't know, is a fantasy series. So in short, what you need to know about the ACOTAR series is that it takes place in a world, a fantasy world, where there's fairies and there's also humans. And fairies and humans, they don't get along. Humans have this idea that fairies are the most dangerous things out there and that they'll kill any human on sight basically. So they try to keep to their side of the world because they're separated. In this first book, you follow Feyre, our main character, as she finds herself entangled with one of the fairies and then you just follow her journey. For this one, you do need to go through a little bit of world building and you'll be a little confused in the beginning, but it does a very good job of catching your attention from the very start, so I wouldn't worry too much about it. Something I love about this specific series and this author is that she is a really good author. Just because I want to read like about fairies and dragons doesn't mean that I'm not gonna be paying attention to the writing, and I do appreciate it when the writing is also really good, and Sarah J Maas is a really great writer. In summary, is it worth your time? I would say 100% yes. Not only because it makes you fall in love with the series and want to keep reading, and I think the ACOTAR series is a 5-star series overall, but also because it's just a good story. It's good writing, it's a good plot, and the only reason why I rank it the lowest in the series is because I love the other ones so much. So is it worth your time? In my opinion, it is. But this book, the book number 2 in the ACOTAR series, A Court of Mist and Fury, this book has gone down as one of my favorite fantasy books of all time. This is my favorite book in the entire series, and just the sexual tension between the two main characters. I just haven't seen a fantasy couple that does what this couple did to me. Is this series worth your time? I would say 100% yes. But this book right here is definitely the best one in the series, in my opinion. Don't skip A Court of Thorns and Roses, because if you skip A Court of Thorns and Roses, you're gonna have to skip A Court of Mist and Fury, and that's just ungodly. Okay, so this author is so popular in the book community. She's one of the most popular authors, if not the most popular romance author out there. Obviously, I'm talking about Emily Henry. Beach Read is probably her most loved book. So Beach Read by Emily Henry follows January and Augustus, and it's basically their love story and their summer romance that turns into something more. Something I really loved about this book is 1, Emily Henry is a really great author. The book is really well written. And 2, the characters are also authors in the story. Emily Henry gives us a little bit of like a behind the scenes of what it actually means to be a writer, and not only the ups but also the downs and like how scary it can feel sometimes. It also touches on grief, which in my opinion only gives the characters more depth, and I really like that when I get that in romance books. All in all, it's just a very fast-paced, easy to read romance, and I would not skip it. I do have to say I'm not as obsessed as everyone else is with Beach Read. I feel like everyone else loves this book so much that they never stop thinking about it, they never stop recommending it, and they're constantly rereading it every single summer. I don't feel that way about it. I didn't feel as connected to the characters. I just think it's like a very light, fun read. I wouldn't skip this story. I think it's a really cute story. I'm just not 100% obsessed with it like everyone else. Our next book, I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy, was super big on TikTok, like right when it came out. And I have to say, it does live up to the hype. It's so good, it's so well written, and just the way that Jennette shares so vulnerably her story, her trauma, and everything she went through. As a reader, she catches your attention in literally the first page of the book, and she tells her entire story so intelligently that it just flows seamlessly and you don't feel like you're reading nonfiction. If you usually want to avoid some subjects, or if you are usually want to look up trigger warnings, I would definitely look up trigger warnings for this book. If you don't know, Jennette McCurdy is a very well-known actress. She starred in iCarly for Nickelodeon, and she just uncovers so many things about the entertainment industry when you're a child, and just how like toxic it is and how much they take advantage of kids in the entertainment industry. But she also very vulnerably shares her relationship with her mom, which was really troubled to say the least. This book had me gasping the entire way through. Like, I'm still in shock about everything Jennette McCurdy went through, and I just don't know how she overcame that. It's just a lot, so I would definitely look up trigger warnings. But if you look up trigger warnings and you're still interested in reading this, I would definitely say don't skip. Like, this is not overhyped. It's really good. And I think it's my favorite memoir that I've ever read. Now, this book is a very famous fantasy series. It's the first book in a fantasy series, and the series as a whole is very well known and like very loved by the book community. Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. And this book wasn't for me. So let me try and break down why it wasn't for me, and maybe it'll help you figure out if it's for you or not. I can look the other way when I'm not reading the most beautiful writing or the best written book ever, if the plot is really good, if it's very character driven, and if it catches my attention. But this book had none of it. The writing was so bad. Like, the writing was just very bad and very cringy in my opinion, but the plot was also not there. Like, I got more than 50% through this book before I DNF'd it, and I could not tell you what this book is about. And I've heard people say that the second book is their favorite book and that they get really attached to the characters in that second book, but I just couldn't get through this book. I literally could not tell you what this book is about. Like I said, so many things were giving so much importance, and then those things turned out to not be important for the plot at all. And that happened with many characters and many plot lines as well, where like you thought the plot was going away and then the author like switched it on you. And that happened so many times that I really got tired, and it got like really predictable, which is ironic because the plot kept taking so many turns, but just like the pattern got very predictable. I didn't get attached to any of the characters. The main character frustrated me so much. I literally didn't care about her at all, and the writing was also very cringy. If you want to not focus on the writing as much as you do the plot, and also really enjoy plots taking you unexpected places constantly, I would say give this a chance. I would personally skip this book. There's so many great fantasy series out there and romantasies out there that have really good writing and really good plots that I would just avoid this one, but that's just my personal opinion. To follow up on that very low note, I have to talk about Fourth Wing. Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros is the most popular fantasy series on Book Talk. If you've never heard of Fourth Wing, which I highly doubt, but if you don't know what Fourth Wing is about, it's basically the characters in this world live in a society where you can choose like many careers, and there's some careers that are very dangerous and higher stakes than others. So we have Violet, our main character. She has trained her entire life to become a scribe, which is a very low stakes career because it's basically like reading, writing, researching, recording events. And she gets very unexpectedly thrown into the writers quadrant, which the writers are basically dragon riders. So obviously it's like the complete opposite. Like, it's such a high stakes career. So you follow her journey and follow her trying to survive the writers quadrant. A lot of other like politics heavy things start happening, obviously, and also the romance. I do have to be really self-aware and admit that I was procrastinating this series just because of how popular it was. I just felt that people were hyping it up so much that I had like really high expectations, and I was just like, what if it lets me down? But then I finally picked it up last month. No, actually this month. And I have to say, it's not overhyped. It deserves the love it gets, and I would not skip it for the world. Like, if you take something out of this video, is to please read Fourth Wing. It's so good. The writing is so good. It gets high stakes in literally the first page you're reading, so it catches you and it hooks you in so fast. I would still say this is a romantasy, but I think the romance, even though it's a big part of the story, it doesn't get very romance heavy till like late in the book. But the plot is just so good. Like, it's not one of those fantasy stories where like you're interested in the plot but you're more interested in the romance. I would say you're equally as interested in the plot than the romance, and that's just very refreshing. And on that same note, I also read Iron Flame, which is the second book in this series, and I do have to say I think I like Fourth Wing better. And I do have to say Iron Flame, the first half of the book felt a little repetitive, but it's so good. Like, the writing is so good, and just the two main characters, like our two main love interests, their relationship is just so good. Satan, the man you are. Yeah, it got a little repetitive in the beginning, but then it got so plot heavy. Like, the last 50%, so many things happen, but it's not like this book where like a lot of things are happening but they don't make sense. No, this is like super plot heavy. Like, the story actually moves forward in that last 50%, and so many things happen, and then it ends on such a, like, I wouldn't say cliffhanger, but just like, I can't wait for the third book to come out in January. It's just an incredible series, and I would not skip it for the world. This is 100% worth your time. To break up the fantasy a little bit, let's talk about If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. If He Had Been With Me is a romance book. It's YA. Our characters are students in high school. And this book was so popular at the beginning of the year. Like, everyone was talking about it, and everyone was recording their reactions at the end and sobbing by the end of it. And I was like, I have to know what the hype is about. And I have to say, I still don't know what the hype is about. It's a cute story. It has really good writing, I would say. I just don't get the hype. So in this story, you follow Autumn and Phineas. And Autumn and Phineas have been best friends for their entire lives. Their moms are best friends, so they grow up together. They have a really beautiful friendship. And then at some point, they drift apart. Neither of them know what happened, and basically you just follow their story and how every time they cross paths they have feelings for each other, but they don't know how to tell the other person that they have feelings for them. And it's just like that vibe for the entire book, but it's just like very low stakes. But I do think it's a very cute story. It's very well written. I just don't think it's worth the hype it has. The ending is very sad, but it didn't make me sob. Like, I didn't feel that connected to the characters to sob. And I was like not interested at all in reading the second book, which I do know people don't like as much as this one. In this book, you follow Autumn, like you follow her point of view, and then the second book is just the same exact story, but from Phineas's point of view. Yeah, I would say with so many great romances and love stories out there, I would personally skip this book. But if you want like a heartfelt romance, cute story, and if you have the time, then give this one a chance, but I would personally skip it. I feel like the series doesn't need an introduction, but this is the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J Maas, which is the same author that wrote the ACOTAR series. I cannot stress this enough. This series is not overhyped, and I'm just like every other girl, and I absolutely ate this series up. In this series, you follow Selena. She is a trained assassin, and she has quickly become the best assassin in the city or kingdom. The story starts when she gets summoned to the castle to compete in some trials in order to win her freedom. If she wins her freedom, she has to work for the king. and kill for him. So this is what you're following in this first book. But the entirety of the Throne of Glass series, like once you have read the 8 books in the series, you know that the series is so much bigger and the plot is so much bigger than this first book. Like the series ends up being about something entirely different than you originally think and know in this first book. But Sarah J Maas is a genius and a great author, and she does it really well in the sense of like each book has its own development, third act conflict, it gets really high stakes, and then by the end of it we end with a little kind of conclusion but also a cliffhanger that makes you want to read the next book. Don't skip the Throne of Glass series. Last but definitely not least, Powerless by Lauren Roberts. Everyone is obsessed with Powerless, and let me tell you right now, I think this is my favorite fantasy series of all time. I always say that this is a great way to get into fantasy. So if you've never heard of Powerless, in this fantasy world, there are elites and there are ordinaries. And elites have powers and ordinaries don't have powers. In this world, ordinaries are targeted and killed. Our 2 main characters are Kai and Pei. Kai is the king's enforcer, which means he actually has the job to ordinaries. And then Peyton, our other main character, she is an ordinary. So these two are supposed to hate each other. I don't think they ever actually hate each other. I would say it's more kind of like a rivals to lovers instead of an enemies to lovers. But it's so good. Like the chemistry between those two is just so palpable. I would say this is one of those stories where I was more interested in the romance than the actual plot. But the plot is also really good, and it's like a very fast-paced read. And just the interactions between those two throughout the book, they're like liquid gold. Like you don't get a lot of them, but when you do, the banter is just so good. The tension is just so good. It left me wanting to see more of them together. And that's exactly what we get in the second book. So in my opinion, you also shouldn't skip Powerless. It's just so good. So yeah, that's it for today's video. Let me know if you want me to do a part 2 because I feel like I could make so many parts of this video. I think the pattern we're seeing here is that most of these books are not overhyped. I definitely agree with most of these books' ratings, and I think they deserve the hype and people love them for a reason. But I just wanted to share like a little bit of each, just so maybe you can skip a book that might not be like up your alley. I always feel like seeing another person's opinions on like TikTok famous books helps to narrow down the ones that you want in your immediate TBR and which ones maybe you won't like as much, but you can always leave for later. So yeah, I hope you liked this video, and I'll hopefully see you in my next video. Bye!